So I typically think of this semester as having two lectures that are of having two very notable lectures, ones that I need to be ready for. One of them is my regular expression Florida Man lecture. It is by far my favorite lecture to give. This is not that lecture. This is the other lecture. This is a lecture I have to do every semester, not because anybody did anything wrong. Nobody did anything wrong, but because I hate doing this lecture because of what's about to happen. What's about to happen is that I'm going to tell you to follow instructions. Most of you are going to follow those instructions. I'm going to tell you what's going to go wrong, and if you make a mistake, I'm going to tell you what those causes are. And about half the class is still going to come up to me and say, what am I doing wrong? And I'm going to have to say, it's the thing I just said. That's what's going wrong. I'm not going to be mad about it, even though I sound mad about it. It's just what happens every single semester. But this one is basically to make sure that you can get Hurricane Tracker, your 7th lab, going. So Hurricane Tracker, for once, is actually occurring during hurricanes, unfortunately. So a very apropos assignment. This serves as kind of the culmination of basically the the first half of the semester. It's basically the first assignment which you'll be able to show to your parents, and they'll go like, "Oh, that's really cool," as opposed to like the other ones where you're printing out multiplication tables or doing some doodles with the turtle. No, this one is actually impressive. When you run it, it should look something like this. It will look something like this when you run it, in which it traces out the path of what we have loaded in is Hurricane Irma, but it works for basically every single hurricane that you can put in that you can collect data for. Okay, the data is already provided for you. It's a matter of reading it, and that's what we're going to go over today. Because today this assignment is all about file reading. Now, the fun thing about this assignment is that it looks horrendously difficult. And it's not. It is not difficult. Once you get into it, you're going to be like, oh, that's actually not so bad. Okay? Now, a couple of just asides as to when you run this. If you're on Mac, occasionally when you start it, it might start as a white screen until the turtle starts moving, in which case, don't worry, that's fine. So just make sure your turtle's moving first before you freak out about it. Similarly, when the program ends, it may either close on you or it may give you a white screen once it closes. That's fine as well. I'm not picky about that. Just sometimes the way the tkinter library set up on Macs can sometimes be a bit of a hassle. But again, the way that this is going to look is what you're going to run it, and this is how it's going to work. It's going to look like that, where what it's doing is that we've got a turtle here, so that hurricane symbol is actually a turtle, and what it's doing is that it's tracing the path of Hurricane Irma with the lines, with these numbers. It's hard to read because it's low resolution. It is low resolution. Right? We've got these numbers here saying what category hurricane it is, and then the intensity, and then the and then this is telling us what the hurricane. This is high intensity, this is low intensity. So it's but once you understand what you're doing, it's not so bad. Now, the reason that I'm bringing this up here as well, and you're probably going to hear all about during your lab, is this giant bolded section here. Okay, giant bolded section, which is that basically telling you that you need to do, is that I provided you with the files to do this in. Do your work in the Irma file. Okay? And do it, and you need to do it, and you can't just make your own Irma file. You got to do it in the one I provide for you. You got to do it in the folder that I provide for you, because otherwise it will break. Because because this is about file reading, and you've got to read other files. And if you don't know where they are, or they're not in the place we expect them, you can't read them. If you demo this assignment to me and you get a file not found exception, you will get an automatic 0, no appeal, no retries on this. because the only reason that happens, the only reason this happens is that you cheated. And I can't prove it, but it is the only reason that it happens. Why? Because there was no way for you to test the file if you get a file note of not found exception. So there was no way for you to turn it in and say I'm done with it. That's why. If you get a file not found exception on this, it's because you can't during your demo. There's no way you could have written it because you could not have run it or tested it. So you wouldn't have turned it in to try to get it to me. Or it just means that you did not understand how it worked. It's a weak argument, which is why you won't be hit with an academic misconduct thing. It's just, it got really awkward before I had this clause in where basically I would have a student come into demo and then I'd wait 15 minutes holding my tongue on what the issue was while it's very obvious that they did not do the work. So it got very awkward. So okay, ran over. So what is this folder? Well, what you're going to do is you're going to download this folder called starterfiles.zip. Now, mistake number one that people make. Mistake number one is that you double click on it and you start working in it. Okay, but what you need to do is that you need to, whenever you're given a zip file, you need to extract that. You need to extract your zip file. Okay, you need to extract the files from it. Otherwise, if you try opening it try opening the files in here, it will open up as a temporary file, and you won't really be able to test it. Okay, so what you need to do is you need to extract these things. Windows has a built-in zip utility, so does do Macs, or if you prefer, you can be like me and have a separate utility for that, but I'll just use it the Windows way, and there we go. We extract it, and now we've got a folder called starter files, which in itself has a folder in it called starter files. That's fine. I don't need that. I've just simply, there we go. And inside it, we have two, so inside starter files, we have two folders and the irma.py. Okay? So let me go ahead and pause for a second just to make sure. What I'll do instead is I'm going to go ahead and open it up in idle because I know that's going to work. Okay. Open recent, so open, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to where I put the file. So it's very important then that when you are working with files and you're downloading them, you are deliberate about where you put them. I'm putting them on my in a folder on my desktop just because that's easy for you to see and easy for me to find. But I highly recommend having a folder in your documents or something. But as we'll see when in about 10 minutes when I start going through the instructions on how to read files, okay, it's very important that you know where your files are. This is the point in which you start, if you haven't really learned about file systems and the way they work on your computer, you're gonna. They work slightly differently in Mac and Windows. No, sorry, they work entirely different on Mac and Windows, but programming languages fortunately don't care, and they handle that nonsense for you. So anyway, so in our starter file folder, we'll open up Irma. And what we'll do is that we've got, it comes with a bunch of stuff already there. So first is Irma setup, which if we read the big comment over here, it creates the turtle and the screen with the map background and coordinate system set to match the latitude and longitude. Return a tuple containing the turtle and the screen. Do not change the code in this function. And so what this will do is that in this function, it does some stuff where it makes the window appropriately sized. It sets the title of the screen to be Hurricane Irma. It changes the coordinate system to be, rather than your Euclidean plane, to be latitude longitude, which I'm not sure how they figured that one out, but that's really cool. And then they'll set up the background for you, and it'll change our turtle's picture into that of a hurricane. We run it, and you'll see that it kind of blinked there for a second, where it blinked, and that's just because it ran and then it's done. That's, again, entirely normal behavior for this, okay? But what it does is that it returns T, WN, and map background image. Of these, so this is a tuple, which basically says I just So programming languages, okay, in most programming languages, you are only able to return one thing, okay, right? We've seen how we can return an integer from a function. We've seen how we could return a string from a function, right? We've done that a bit, especially in Lab 6. What you can't do in other programming languages, but you can do in Python, is you can return multiple things. You can return multiple items. You can pack them up like this and unpack them. Except technically you're not returning multiple things. You're actually packing them into a single box and returning that single box. So Python's just lying to you and is actually under the same restrictions. It's just being helpful about it. Anyway, the only variable you care about is t, your turtle. And then that's it. You can the rest of the code is to move the turtle in the appropriate manner. This last bit says if name underscore underscore name underscore underscore equal main. For those of you coming from Java or C++ and you're wondering where your public static void main function is, this is it. This down here. It's not mandatory. This one simply says, though, to translate for everybody, this is saying, hey, if this program is the one I just hit the run button on, if this is the program that I hit the run button on, run this code. Otherwise, don't run this code. Yes? Where? Oh.
You're already running the code.
So the answer is no, because if I didn't have that and I imported this file with its functions, it would run if I didn't have this, okay, and it looked like this instead, and I imported irma.py, then it would run irma. It would run the program. So that's why it's there. So that helps you basically be able to test your library functions. It's a good question, by the way. It's a very good question. It does feel redundant, and it is most of the time very redundant. Okay. So, as I said earlier, this is the part, so we're going to talk about file reading today. File reading in Python is fantastic. I love it. It is so much easier than in something like Java. Let's go ahead and see how it works in Java just to kind of take a breath of fresh air, okay? Okay, so what I'm going to do, now the main thing about file reading is that there are two types of files that exist on your computer, broadly speaking, right? The first type are what we call text files, and the second type are what we call binary files. Text files can be read by a human. Binary files can't. Text files are things like .txt, any source code file, .csv files, as we'll see, whereas and then the binary files are like, believe it or not, .document files or .excel files. Those files have to be read by a program in order for you to read it. Like, you cannot just simply go into it and it is not formatted in ASCII data. Okay? Okay. So what we're going to do is we are going to do a new and then file reading example. This is Java. I'm just kind of showing you this to just kind of show you. So here we've got a public static class. Let's go ahead and create a file I've got a file. It's called temps.txt. Wonderful. Okay. So to read a file in Java, I'll first need to make a main function, public static void main. Then what I need to do is I need to create a scanner. Scanner is equal to new scanner. It automatically imported that for me. That's great. Specifically, what am I going to scan? I'm going to scan a new file, and it's going to be a new file object, and it's going to read temps.tx. Great. Also need to import that function, which is great. A new file. Come on. Import java.util.file. It exists, I'm sure. Does it not? In file. Oh, very, very fascinating. Why is it not? Cannot resolve symbol file. Or is it Java? Oh, it's java.io.file. it's in the, I was looking in the wrong, barking up the wrong tree entirely. It's import java.io file. There we go. Now it found it. Now it's happy. Oh, except it's not, because it's saying, hey, this could cause an error, so we need to throw a try-catch exception around it. Okay, fine. I'll throw a try-catch around it. And then I do while while scanner dot has next line, not has next, but has next line, while there is a line to read in this file, a string line is equal to scanner dot next line. Read the line. Believe it or not, I'm actually very happy with this code because this is a lot easier than when I learned Java. This is actually a lot easier than when I learned Java. The equivalent, though, for Python is the following. Okay, the equivalent for learning how to read a file in Python is pretty straightforward. So let's go ahead, and I'm just going to throw a file onto my desktop. And I'm going to create a new .txt file. You can follow along and do this too. You can just simply create a new text file on your desktop or something like that, or not, because I'm going to show you how to download it, because today what we're going to be doing is downloading a book and reading through it, or having the computer read through it, okay? So this is just kind of show you how it is. So I'm going to call this test.txt, and I'm going to create a new Python file. Right-click, new, and I'm not sure how it works on Mac, but if that's fine, if it's not going. And rather than creating a txt file, I'm just going to create something called file reading.py. Make sure the extension is a Python extension. Open it up in idle, because, again, I'm going to be using idle to open things up. File reading. Okay. And to read, so let's open up that. And then the second thing I have to do is what? I have to open up, fun thing with this, you can open up any text file or any file you want in idle. Just by default, it lets you only open up Python files, but you can select a menu bar both here or else, and you can open up anything. So I'm going to open up the test.txt file, and I'm going to write some stuff in it. Hello, this is a test file, right? So I just wrote some text into it. Okay, it's a text file. It contains text. Okay, so I can open this up in any text editor and it will read it, as opposed to, say, a picture of my precious Cinnamon, right? Cinnamon's such a great cat. Let's go ahead and, come on. It says it's, what? I can't open it up in Python? I can't see it? It says, no, you can't decode it in Python. It won't work. Because as much as I would like to, I can't open up, I just cannot open a picture of my cat in a text editor. Actually, I have 3 cats. They are all, I think, around 14 now, so they're very, very happy. So going back, how do I read a file in Python? Okay, come on, let me read it. There we go. So very simple. You say open, and that's pretty much it. You say open, you give it the file name, which I think I called test.txt. The file name, by the way, includes both the name and the thing after the dot. The thing after the dot, you may have noticed that files, pretty much every file on your computer has what's called an extension. .py, .txt, .doc. That's actually part of the name. Believe it or not, that's for the computer to use. To tell it, okay, what program should I associate with this? What program should I open with this? Because you'll have a default program that if you try to open a file, it's going to be associated with this. But you can actually try to pretty much open any file in any other program. You just may get unexpected results. It's fun, though, sometimes, opening up things like image files and trying to see them as waveforms and stuff like that. You can do weird stuff like that. So open.txt, and then we say, and then we have to do another one. I don't think you have to do it anymore, but it's still good practice. So we do open test.txt, and then we say R. Not because we're a pirate, but because there's 3 options we could put there. We could put R, we could put a W, or we could put an A. R, in this case, stands for read, because I want to read a file. W stands for writing, because you can use the same syntax to write files with, which is fantastic. And then append, which is W writes a new file, so it will whenever you run it, it will create a new file and overwrite what was already there. Append says if the file's already there, I'm going to open it up and add to the end of it. So 2 different forms of writing, right? Overwrite or add on. We don't really need to worry about that, but then let's see. I'll call this data is equal to open test.txt and print data.read lines, I believe it is, all underscore. I always forget, and I always have to remember, but that's fine. And that's it. And it read it. Oh, no, not read lines. I think it's just simply read. There's 3 ways to do it. Yeah, just read. There we go. So that's the file I created, right? Hello, this is a test file. Okay. Now, test reading is, so first off, file reading is why do I care about file reading? Because file reading allows us to basically have data stored somewhere else and read it. The reason this is important is because you really need to share data around. Over here, I've got our data. In the data folder over in our starter files, we have what are called CSV files. Typically, if you try to open them, by default, you'll try to open them in Excel, believe it or not. They're not Excel files, though, but it will open up in Excel by default a lot of the time. But this is what's in them. A CSV file, CSV is an abbreviation. It stands for comma separated values, which is basically all this is a table. It's rows and columns where and the columns are all separated by commas. So the file for irma.csv, what does it have? It has the date, it has a day and time stamp, says at this day and this time, this hurricane was at this latitude, this longitude, it had this wind speed and this pressure. And then it just simply has a lot of timestamps in chronological order, because it'd be a nightmare for you if they weren't in chronological order. And also because that'd be just a mess. Why would you store data if it wasn't in chronological order? Okay? But this is what a CSV file is. And so now I don't have to store this inside irma.py. I can hand it to somebody else who's doing a different programming language so that they can do their own analysis. Yes?
Sometimes when I use Excel, it'll ask me if I want to save it as a CSV file. Is this,
yes.
If you open this up in Excel, but everything's separated by a comma, be in its own separate cell?
It would be in its own box, yeah. So basically, CSV files are basically the way. When you take something in Excel and you export it as a CSV, you're essentially exporting it in a format that a programming language can read. There are libraries for things like Python and other programming languages that can interact with Excel, but it's not as easy as just simply acting on this. All right, so let's go ahead and see. A lot of you sound like you really should be, you might want to, take a break or, be somewhere else, because if you're sick, just don't come to class. It's fine. A lot of you that...
I sneezed once.
It's not you. I'm not talking... It's in general. All right. Let me just be very clear here. I've caught COVID once, and it wrecked me. It absolutely, positively wrecked me. Okay? I've got permanent hearing damage in my left ear. So, stay safe. Do your best to do what you need to take care of yourself. I don't mind if you miss a lecture. That's why I record these things. Okay. So, now let's go ahead and just simply, so let's go through this, okay? Now, so you're going to want to figure out how to read this file, but let's go ahead and just see what reading files are like. So this is the bit where I say, okay, please follow directions because otherwise it's going to get painful. So there's two issues you're going to have when you're doing this, okay? First is when you download the file, you fail to download the file. You don't download the right thing, okay? So when I tell you to download a text, such as when you download the text file and instead you download the web page, or when you download, or I tell you to download a text file and you download the PDF accidentally. This is fairly easy to rectify, just download the right file. The primary issue that most of you will have, if you have an issue, is I'll tell you to download a file and put it somewhere where you know it is. Okay, the key here is that when I open this file, test.txt, where is it? It is on my computer. Where is it? On my desktop. Where? See, I've got file reading over here, and I've got test.txt over here. If I take this and I just toss this into the starter file folder, saying I can't do that because it's open, okay, that's fine. I will go ahead and close it. Okay, where is it open in? So let's go ahead and close up this. Try again. No, is it open in here? Try again. There we go. There we go. So now I've put it in here. Okay? I put it in a separate folder. They're no longer in the same folder, right? File reading is in the desktop, and starter files is technically in the the test file is still in the desktop, but it's in a completely different folder. They're on different levels. It's the difference between something being in the drawer now versus being on the desktop with all your other stuff. It's in a drawer now. So now if I try to run it, I will get this, which is the file, which you'll get something that says a file not found error, test.txt. So this is going to happen for a couple reasons. First reason is that it's somewhere else, or the Python file you're writing is not where you think it is. So it's hard to see over here, but if you go up to your title bar, both on of the window you're coding in, both on a Mac and on a PC, it has the file path of the file you're currently working on. It says it's working in users/profa/desktop/filereading.py. Got it? So it's saying, hey, this is where that is. And you want them to be basically in the same place. Okay? You want those files to be in the same place. The second, so what if they are in the same place? You're 100% sure they are in the same place, right? And you run it and you still get an error. Well, the second reason is that you might have misspelled it. Right, that's another common reason. Now, as annoyed as I sound at the beginning of this lecture about what's going to happen, these are all mistakes you all have to make. You literally have to make these mistakes so you don't make them in the future. So again, like if you come up to me and with an issue and needed help, you'll find that I'm usually able to fix it pretty quickly. But the only reason I can fix that quickly is because I've made this mistake before. I've made this mistake lots of times. All right. So what we're going to do is we are going to go and go to Project Gutenberg. Okay. So the website you want to go to is gutenberg.org. Okay. So Gutenberg, Gutenberg.org. This will bring you to this web page. Gutenberg is one of those nonprofits, I believe. I think it's a nonprofit, but what it is that it is one of those archive sources that are just wonderful on the internet where they just hold stuff. Specifically what this holds, it holds a ton of text. Books that have left the public domain. books that have left copyright and now are in the public domain. Things don't leave public domain. So this has, in other words, this might have a lot of classic literature like Treasure Island. Specifically, Treasure Island sounds good. Is that on here? Search and browse. So I'm going to go and search for, over here on quick search, I'm going to look for Treasure Island. Yeah, it looks good. Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson, right? So here you can basically, if it's a book out of copyright, you can get a copy here, an electronic copy. Now, reading things by just simply, on a computer, that's its own kind of special hell, I guess, because there's questions about how do you format it, how do you adjust for page size, making sure things wrap properly and that kind of stuff. People have worked on that problem for a while. What about illustrations? Well, text files can't do illustrations, so we just ignore that. But over here you'll see read now or download for free. There's a bunch of different options here. Okay? Read online, EPUB, which is for Kindles and stuff like that. Specifically a Kindle format, HTML. But what we're looking for over here is this, plain text UTF-8. That is a text file, plain text UTF-8. So what you want to do is go to Gutenberg.org, ebooks. This is actually ebook 120. You can just look for Treasure Island. And then we want to get a copy of this. Now, there's a bunch of ways to get a copy of this one, okay? The first way, we need to download this. Specifically, we need to download this into a location we can trust. So there's a couple ways to do that. First is right-click, save link as, or the equivalent on your browser, and just drop it wherever you need it to be, okay, wherever you want it to go. Just remember to keep track of where you dropped it, okay? So be intentional about where you drop it. For this purposes, I'm going to drop it on my desktop. Another thing you can do, though, if that's not pulling up, is you can always click on this file, and it will, and that might bring you to a download prompt, depending on the browser you use, or it might bring you this file. In which case, you can just simply press right-click, save page as for this one, because it's a text file, so it's not an HTML file. And in fact, in order to make sure this works, you want to make sure it says text file over here, not HTML file. If you try to do that on the previous page, then you hit one of the dead ends that I was talking about. What dead end was that? You try doing save page as over here accidentally, it will tell you, you want to download the web page, right? You can, because guess what? The web page is just code. What you're seeing here is HTML, or rather rendered HTML. It's a programming language sent to your computer, sent to a web browser telling it how it's going to render. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and download this. Going to put it on my desktop. And that's essentially it. So here we go. We have our file over here. We have pg120.txt, and we have file reading over here. So I have the file reading file. I'm over here. You can create a new file to do file reading with if you want, but again, I'm just going to go ahead and I'll go ahead and basically start from blank, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to call this save as. I'm going to save this Python file first. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I'm saving it in the same folder that I saved the file I downloaded, okay? I'm going to make sure they're in the same place, because that's how it's going to be able to find it. There's other ways to find it, but this is the easiest way for Python to find it, simply by being in the same place. So I'm going to call this treasure.py. And you can name this, and this file downloaded by default, it came with the default name of PG120. Why did it come up with such a cryptic name? Because it's the 120th file on Project Gutenberg. Okay? Now, what do we do? Well, I don't want to open it there. Come on, close. Close. What we want to do now is open the file and test if it works. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to type open, and the name of it is pg120.txt, and right, I'm going to put it in the read format and equal to data. I'm just going to call it data over here, and I'm just going to run it to make sure it works. Great. So if this line executes and does absolutely nothing, which is what it just happened over here, give me a second to put these side by side. If you run this and absolutely nothing happens, congratulations, you succeeded in following my directions. Because if, on the other hand, you had an issue with downloading the file, you will get a file not found exception. All right. Everybody follow along so far? Anyone hit a file not found exception? Couldn't download the file. What browser are you using? You're using Google Chrome, so you should be able to right-click on one of those and say Save Link As or Save Page As.
I clicked Save Link As.
All right. Yeah, there you go. That's what you want.
Yeah.
And then just simply download. Just again, make sure you're downloading the right file.
All right, thanks.
Where is this one? Is it on the desktop? Hold on, I'll be up there in a second. If you're having trouble, feel free to ask your people next to you for help.
Is it download shift, download secure?
You don't everybody. See, this lecture involves me having to run around the room a lot. All right, so in general, we want to have the file extensions. Now, this is very frustrating if you're using Windows, because if you're using Windows, you may have picked up on something. It's subtle, though. My computer has the file extensions as written down on here. Yours doesn't, by default. For Windows, for some godforsaken reason, I don't know why. I assume it's because they just wanted to give security people just a utter fit, because it's so stupid. They decided to hide the file type extensions, which means Grandma's going to be double-clicking on .exes and not realizing get a hell of a lot more than she used to be. Yes?
Didn't they fix this in 98 with batch files? They just brought back the problem.
Well, I wouldn't say just. This has been there for a while. So what you can do is you can go into your options on Windows, and you can just tell it to, let's see, if you go to View, you can display the full path into title bar. Hey, that sounds useful. And then, but where is that? Drive letter. No. It is, there should be, uncheck hide extensions for known file types. That should be unchecked. Normally it's checked. I see I hit defaults and it's went back to check. Uncheck that box and suddenly you'll be able to see your file type extensions. Because you may have accidentally downloaded a file and named it test.text.text at no fault of your own. By no fault of your own. So over here, if you go into, so if you're in File Explorer, you can go to Options, you can go to View, and there's a box here that says hide extensions for known file types. Uncheck the box. Uncheck the box. All right, I'm going to go around and keep helping people. keep going for a second here. Okay. And now you know why I do this in lecture, because otherwise I'd be a very, very busy man about 3 days before Irmo's due. Okay, so, all right. Long story short, so let's assume for the sake of argument you've got this thing downloaded. Okay, so now we can do something. Now we can run it. We can actually read the file by going print data.read, and we'll see if I have to add another line just specifically for this file's download from Project Gutenberg or not. We'll see. Yeah, I do have to. Whatever. Okay, great. So so this is a completely different error. By the way, if you got to this point, you probably hit this error, but only if you're on a Windows computer, I think. Specifically, what it's saying is that you can't decode this because and this is just because Windows is stupid. Windows is being really stupid here. Anyway, the way we handle this is actually fairly straightforward for Windows right now. Give me a second to just simply pull this up. Yes, encoding, that's right. Okay, so the file I'm reading, PG120.txt. Encoding, sorry, no, the mode is run. And then encoding, this is the bit that if you run it and you crashed and the data.read gave you an error that was not a file not found, but rather a decoding error. I think we just write encoding, because I'm working off of memory here. Encoding is equal to UTF-8. UTF-8, because we downloaded a UTF-8 file and we're just trying to tell it, hey, Windows, get a grip on yourself. It's a UTF-8 file, not a Windows formatted file. Great, and that's it. So here's the full program for reading a file. Now this you will only have to do in this particular lecture with what we've done for Project Gutenberg, right? If you're on a Mac, you may not even have to worry about this, okay? But that's it. So we can read it. And if you run it on VS Code, by the way, it's just going to spit it out. If you run it on idle like I'm doing, it's going to say squeeze text 10,000 lines. This is idle trying to be nice to us and saying, hey, do you really want me to print out all those lines? That seems like a really bad idea, man. It is a really bad idea. Don't print out all those lines. Instead, what we're going to do is that, well, what are these things that I'm printing out, that I'm working with anything? Well, print data. First off, what is it? When you open a file, it creates what's called an I/O wrapper. What the heck's an I/O wrapper? Well, I/O in this case stands for input-output. It's a wrapper for doing input and output functions. Okay? So what we've got here is something that we can operate with. We can modify this file by adding things to it if we were in write mode, but we're in read mode. We only want to read from it. Now, what does read do? Well, read, notice that I had to print it in order to get anything, which means that it's returning something. Specifically, what does read do? It takes the entire contents of the file and dumps it into a string for us. I'll just call it text is equal to data.read. And instead of printing out the entire text, what I'm going to do, because again, that's an entire freaking book, right? Instead, I'm going to print out a slice. Let's go with text 1,000 to 2,000. Characters 1,000 to 2,000. Okay, just to test this out, because it's a big file. And the first bit's a preamble. And so, we've got to the bit which says, to the hesitating purchaser, if Sailor Tales to Sailor Tunes, Storm and Adventure, Heat and Cold, if Schooners, Islands, and Maroons, and Buccaneers and Bury Gold. So it's got the preamble to Treasure Island in there. Wonderful. Completely unintentional on my part, by the way. So anyway, it is a... By the way, if you're curious about Treasure Island, my opinion is that the one true rendition of Treasure Island is Muppet Treasure Island, featuring, I think it's Stephen Curry? Is that his name? What is his name? It's the guy who stars in Rocky Horror Picture Show as Tim Curry. That's it. Thank you. Thank you, Tim Curry. Yes, he does an excellent job acting because he considers himself an honorary Muppet in his acting, essentially. It is an excellent rendition, definitely worth the watch. So, anyway, we've got our entire thing over here of our of these 1,000 characters. Now, there's 3 ways we can read a file in Python. Okay, the first way is doing this with the .read. Okay. .read is very useful here because it just simply says, hey, we're going to just take this and dump it into here, okay? The second way we can read in Python is by doing the following. Lines is equal to data.readLines. Now, this is an exceptionally good way of doing things personally. I find this to be even more useful than doing a straight read function. Why? Because it breaks because it creates a list. It creates a list for us, and every entry in the list is an individual line in the file. So let's go ahead and print out lines, and we'll do a different slice here, 100 to 200. Oh, squeeze text 71 line, sure. And over here it says, hey, here's your table of contents, and then it's /n/n/n, treasure island /n. So it includes that end of line, the new line for an end of line in there. So this is useful because now we can iterate over this and essentially print it out. Yes.
So when you say iterate over this, are you?
I mean like this. I could say for line in lines, and I could just do that, right? So I can just iterate over this slice, right? I'm just iterating. I create a slice from lines 100 to 200. Why am I doing a slice? Because I don't want to print out the entire bloody file. That's why.
Is that going to work for lines and lines, or does it mean for lines and lines?
I meant for line and lines. I was typing and talking at the same time. It's a hazard of the profession. Okay, print out line. You'll notice annoyingly that I like to do for singular in plural because it reads well, but occasionally that does mean I make the mistake that I just made. Okay, and so now as I print each line, it prints it out like that. And it's got a new line in between them because not. So let's go ahead and do end is equal to, so we don't have a new line between everything. Run it. And there we go. Now it's printing out just fine. Right? Excellent job, I think. All right. Now what do I do? Well, this was this one is one. So this is probably a thing to keep in the back of your head of how to read a file in Irma, okay? Or for Irma. The third way to read a file, by the way, is the part that made me actually like Python. I didn't actually really know Python until I started having to use that to create a database for a bunch of astronomers. And I was like, how does this even work? I need to write the scripts. Okay, but I don't want to work with SQL directly. I guess I can work in Python. And so I tried it. And I'm like, how do I read a file in Python? Well, you open a file in Python like this. And I'm like, this can't work, can it? This can't possibly work. This was the moment that I decided that Python was an amazing programming language, by the way. Notice that all I have is created the file object. I haven't done read or read lines. I'm just saying, hey, I want to iterate over this data. Do it for me, please. And it does. It just does. It works just out of the box. Again, Python, what I really cherish about it is that it is a programming language that understands the value of doing the least surprising thing. A for loop, yeah. The only other thing that would make as much sense is that if instead of printing out a line, it printed out an individual character. That kind of makes a sense, but reading by a line is more useful. And there we go. It's printing out essentially the entire book line by line. That takes a while, by the way, because writing text to a screen is actually expensive, more expensive than you'd expect computationally. Printing so we'll go on for a while. Yes. So if you're in PyCharm, you're in your if you're in PyCharm, I would normally say you're in your own special hell there, but you're not. PyCharm just has its own kind of weird way of doing it. Fortunately I already have IntelliJ open, and PyCharm is done by the same people who do IntelliJ, so pay attention for a second. The way PyCharm works is that it organizes things into projects. Same with IntelliJ. So if you're using PyCharm, what you want to do is that you want to drag that file into whatever you want to read into your project. If you want to work on Irma, you want to make sure that that is opened as a project in PyCharm. If you want to do that in PyCharm, but again, PyCharm here is an industrial strength solution. You're bringing an Apache helicopter essentially to a knife fight. So it's extremely strong, but it's again, it can be a bit overwhelming for those kind of things. What? You don't want to throw the zip file in there. You want to throw the unzipped zip file, right? You want to throw the unzipped folder in there. Okay. Now let's go. So now that we know that, okay, we're starting to get an idea here of in the world what do we need to do to work on Irma? Okay. What do I need to do to work on Irma? Okay. So what I need to do is that the goal of Irma is that I've got this turtle that I need to mimic the path of Hurricane Irma. Okay? How do I do that? Well, we have all this data over here for different hurricanes. And as long as your hurricane, and by the way, as long as you've got data in the same format, you could take, it can track that. Hurricane Helene, sure, it can do that too. You just need to make sure you have the data. It's easy enough to get. Pretty much every hurricane is tracked in this format, which is date, time, latitude, longitude, wind and pressure. So the important bit is not the date or the time. You know that those are always going to be in order, so you can really ignore that. What you need to do is, okay, I need to make sure the turtle follows this path. What's the path? Well, I need to move it along x and y's normally. Well, you don't have x and y's. You have latitude and longitude. So instead you move it to the latitude and longitude. But the program's already done the job of saying, okay, if you give me a latitude and longitude, I'll move it to the right x and y for you. Make sense? So you guys just got to move. So, okay, so what I got to do is I just read each line. In every line, I figure out what is the latitude and what is the longitude. Get those values, okay, and move the turtle to those values. That's it. Well, how do I get those values? Well, these are comma-separated values, meaning that you can treat a line as a list. And if it's a line as a string, and I can turn this into a list. How can you turn a string into a list? Yes. With split. Thank you. With split. You split along the commas. Split along the commas. Okay? So you just split along the commas. Ignore this field. Latitude, longitude. Wind speed is what you need to figure out what intensity it is. But what you want to but the first step you want to do is being able to read this file. Right? Being able to read this file. So why don't we take a look at that right now, because this is the first hurdle here. Right? I've got this file called irma.csv, and I want to read it. And it's not a text file, it's not a .txt file, but it is a text file, meaning I can read it. Yes?
Why am I still opening Excel?
That's fine. You can right click on it though, but idle doesn't care because it's going to be opening on its own. So let's go ahead and open up irma.csv. Open irma.csv, and then we got to do it in read mode. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to run this, and you'll see that we're going to get an error. It will say, hey, I can't find irma.csv, which makes perfect sense, right? Because what did I say? We're running irma.py. There is not an irma.csv folder in here, right? So irma.csv file in here, right? Now, for a lot of you, your instinct is, okay, I just need to move this file out of the data folder, right? And then yes, that would work if you moved it out. But that's not the correct solution here. The correct thing to do is that we want to look inside the folder. We want to look inside the folder. How do we do that? Well, everything in computers has a path. That's your file. The file name of a computer is actually a very long file name. If we go and hit properties on this, come on, properties. It says if you, or whatever, sorry, I've got it at a low scale over here. Right here it says C drive, users, Profa, desktop, starter files. So the full name of this file, the full path of this file would essentially be C drive, users, Profa, desktop, starter files, / irma.py. That's called the absolute path, where you know where basically you can find it from the top. It's going to be very similar in Macs. The difference is that because it's a Unix-based system, the file path will look something like this. It will say / home / your username. Sorry, it'll be either / home / your user. No, it'll be probably / users / your name / home / desktop / starter files in this kind of case, something along those lines. But it's just going to be, but it's going to start with a / rather than having a separate C drive, A drive, B drive. A and B. By the way, the A and B drives used to be floppy disks. That's why it starts. You start out with the C drive because A and B used to be the floppy disks, and those used to be the most important thing. They're not anymore. So anyway, so everything just starts with C because that's kind of the assumption these days. So anyway. So what we need to do is we got to look inside the folder for this file. And the way you do that is using the / notation that I was kind of hinting at. You say, if you want to find something in the folder and that folder is where you are, you just simply say the name of the folder / the file you want. How do we know that? Well, from up here. Images / Atlantic Basin. Right? We have an images folder, which has the background. We have an images folder that holds the hurricane. So it's the same format. Data / irma.csv. And so now you have a file that you can run and it'll work. And yes, it will blink white, possibly. That's fine. It will work once. It will stop doing that blink once you actually start moving the turtle. So before I go full loop on this, let me be very clear, because you may have seen, because somebody already mentioned this in Discord about making the same mistake. When I first did this one, it took me about 3 hours to do this. 2.5 of those hours were my own goddamn fault, okay? Because I did not know the difference between latitude and longitude. Okay, one is X and one is Y. Which is which? Look at Wikipedia. Which is which? Look at Wikipedia. Okay? If you just think about, and if you happen to unintuitively, and if you happen to do the thing where you get it wrong because your intuition just didn't work on there, and you're like, I'm pretty sure my turtle should be moving in the right place, try flipping your X and Y's. If you do latitude and then longitude, try doing longitude then latitude. Right? Just flip them and you'll see, oh, there's my turtle. I spent 2.5 hours trying to figure out what I did wrong in my code. And the answer is, I did nothing wrong, I just put the variables in the wrong order, right? That's a very common mistake. So there you go. That is a very common mistake for students to make. Your professor made it. Don't feel bad if you make it. Just learn from my experience, please, rather than spending 2.5 hours trying to fix it. But that should also tell you I spent 3 hours doing this. 2.5 was that single error. That means it took me basically half an hour to do this program. If that, it really did not take me that long. This program, once you get it, it's easier than it looks. Once you understand it. The second thing, okay, is now hopefully you understand why we have this instant 0 here, because typically what would happen is a student would get the irma.py file from a friend, and then they would try running it without the starter files. They would just run it as its own thing. Well, that's not going to happen if you were writing the file, right? Because you can't read the file otherwise. Or, that's actually pretty much the only time that would happen. Because they would just have the IRMA file, or they would have it somewhere else and have the folder, and they'd be like separate things. And again, you can't write this program without having access to the files. If you're not sure, just ask me. Again, this only applies when you're demoing, not when you're asking me for help. Got it? Right? It only applies when you say, I'm done, I'm ready for my grade. Okay? If you're coming to me and saying, I don't know where the file is or whatnot, I need help, that's not a 0. That's you doing your job and asking me for help. Make sense to everybody? So don't let this freak you out too much, right? This is specifically to catch people who did not do the work. Okay? If you're trying to do the work, I'm going to help you all I can. All right. Now, before I dismiss everybody for the day, I have gotten a lot of emails from you this past weekend. Now, that's a bad thing, but it's all the same thing. You're all asking me for an interview for the CS 1001 class. I'm more than happy to do that for you. So if I haven't gotten back to you, it's because scheduling this is a pain. So I may just simply make an announcement and say, hey, during this time on Wednesday or Thursday evening, just drop in and I'll be ready and I can handle that for you, okay? So if I don't reply to you and you see that general announcement, let me know if that doesn't work for you, let me know, okay? Okay, take care.